Cool. We've got a lot more people in the meeting than I expected, which is fun. I mean, I didn't mean to sound, it sounds like I'm, saying that BirdView isn't a fascinating topic. BirdView is a very fascinating topic. It was fascinating to me. I guess I'm pleased and gratified at the number of people who also find it interesting enough to join the meeting. Okay, well, now I will officially start. Looks like almost everybody is in from the waiting room. I'm going to count on Tom to continue to admit people as they show up. So welcome everybody to this meeting of Carpinteria Birdwatchers for whatever today's date is, Thursday, April 18th. Tonight's meeting will be on BirdView, a very cool tool for sort of diving into eBird data that we will learn a lot more about from Steve Colwell, who is in the meeting. Hello, Steve.
Hello.
And also Mark Holmgren is, I believe, in the meeting, but I don't see his thumbnail, but we have enough participants that maybe I'm just not seeing all the thumbnails.
No, Mark, your video is not on, Mark.
Camera and unmute yourself if you wish to speak and be seen, but you don't need to speak or be seen yet. But when we get there, that will be useful. Announcements before we talk about that. This Saturday at 8 a.m., we will have an outing at the Carpinteria Saltmarsh Nature Park, where we have been a number of times before. So meet along Ash Avenue towards the south end, the entrance kind of close to the bathrooms there. And we will meet there at 8 o'clock Saturday morning and see what's happening out in the marsh. It is spring migration. There are lots of cool new birds showing up, and it's a very exciting time to be out birding. Because the usual suspects are being joined by more unusual suspects, and it's just a good fun time. So before I jump in, does anybody have any questions or anything they want to raise and discuss? Yeah, so Tom mentioned in the room that they saw a white-faced ibis at the salt marsh, which is one of those cool birds showing up that we didn't necessarily see all the time. So that's exciting. I will mention, by the way, really quick, we are trying to do this thing that we have been doing for a few months now of having a combination Zoom and in-person meeting at the Carpinteria Public Library. So I think it will work-ish. If people in the room specifically have comments, I may need to repeat them so that the people in Zoom can hear them. But with that one exception, I think it should just work. Okay. So as I was saying, questions, feedback, important things people want to share.
John, Mark isn't able to unmute. Is that a setting at your end?
So I'm hearing you now, Steve. What were you saying? Can you repeat that?
Mark has let me know on a side channel that he's unable to unmute his microphone. Is that a setting at your end, or should he be able to?
I can ask him to unmute. Yeah, we can ask him to unmute, but I don't think we can forcibly unmute him.
You're not
maybe, in the Zoom controls. I'm not sure what his screen looks like, since I don't know if he's on mobile or a computer.
It's a computer, but so anybody can unmute right now.
Yeah, I believe so. Yeah. Can we get somebody else to unmute, Sue or Eve or someone?
Yeah,
can you,
I'm
unmuted. I'm okay.
I'm muted.
We can talk.
Okay, so other people are able to unmute. As a fallback plan, if Mark has input, he could make it in chat and we could, sort of share it that way, but it'd be ideal if we could actually hear his voice.
Yeah, no, he's part of the present. He's a presenter, so we kind of need him.
You know what? Yeah,
Maybe he could try his phone rather than. I know he has.
Well, it worked earlier, so
You heard Mark earlier?
I mean, when I was Zooming with Mark earlier today.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't think there's anything else I can do at my end. So I would encourage Mark maybe exit from Zoom and rejoin the meeting.
Yeah, okay, I'll tell him that.
Sometimes stuff will get unstuck when you do that.
I can begin while he's working
I'll talk to Mark on the phone and see if I can help him.
Okay, yeah, thanks, Adrian. That's very helpful. Yeah, and Mark says in chat, I'll try that. So that's great.
Okay.
Okay, so, I guess that is, what do I want to do? Maybe I want to maximize Zoom so that folks in the room can see more of it. Okay, okay, well, Steve, are you ready to
Yes.
fire away?
Yeah, I can begin. So,
Now we can't hear you in the room.
can you hear me now?
Okay, so there is a thing, Steve, I've noticed the last few times I've done these meetings, I'm not sure if it's something I did at my end, but the person on the remote end can talk for a few seconds and we won't hear anything, but then we do start to hear them.
Oh, interesting. Okay. So I will blather on and then I will start talking. So here I go.
Okay, so maybe it's just me.
Okay. Oh, I can see that. Okay. I can sort of see the signal when I get handed the mic here. So I can use that. So BirdView. So the first thing about BirdView is why did I make it? And BirdView is just a retired guy's project. It's free to use. And the reason I created it was that really it was kind of envy of Mark and John and all the pro birders because they cruise around through the county and they know exactly where to go, when to go to see every bird. And they have all this knowledge in their heads. They just know what kind of trees, everything, where to look. So I wanted to learn that as a beginning birder. And a big source of data for us is eBird. There's a ton of stuff in the eBird checklist that tells you all sorts of information, but it's just a bunch of data, and it's numbers, and it's very hard to get any useful information out of it. So I wanted to make it so I could visualize that and really see into the data and get pretty pictures and try to understand it. So that was one goal, make it visualized. And then the other goal is that there's information hidden in a couple different places in Santa Barbara, actually several different databases. One's eBird, another is the Breeding Bird Study, and then there's the Birds of Santa Barbara County by Paul Lehman. There's all sorts of information sources. And it was a little bit of a problem for me that, it's all over the place. And how can I have a unified place to learn this stuff? So BirdView is that. Right now, BirdView has just two main information sources, eBird and the Breeding Bird Study, but I hope to add more. And the goal is to just have it be any search you want to do. I'd say the overall goal for BirdView then is easily answer questions that you have about birds. And you don't have to load a database into your spreadsheet and do things with numbers, none of that. You just do a couple clicks and drags and learn stuff. So that's the goal. So some example questions of these easy kind of questions that you might answer are, where can I find a blue grosbeak? Where would I look for one? And say I'm a parent, I could ask, what birds might my child see in our backyard? Or what time of year should I start looking for Swainson's hawks to fly by? So any of these kind of questions, it's nice to have one place to go where you can get the answer. So now I think is a good time to switch to BirdView itself, and we'll see how it works. This is the point where Mark was going to start being with us, but he looks like he's still out, huh?
So Steve, can you hear me?
Yes.
So Mark is attempting to, and I see some comments from him in chat. He says, yeah, I'm not sure. I'm going to try making Mark a co-host and see if that helps.
Well, that's a good idea.
He's not in the meeting. That's interesting, even though he's chatting. So
He's
apologies,
in the
folks.
meeting.
Give
I
us just a
see.
minute here to fiddle. Like it shows him here. I can ask him to unmute. I can make him a co-host. He's only in the meeting once that I can see. All right, so Mark, I've tried to make you a co-host, which may give you a little more capability.
All right, I'll proceed in the meantime. So I'll do a screen share so we can look at BirdView. Is that coming through?
Yeah, looks good. So I'm going to suggest if you can, we can maybe go for a while. We can take a break and maybe do more intense efforts to try and get working for Mark. I'm not seeing anything I can do at my end, though, to facilitate. I'm not sure what the issue is. Is there a version of the talk, Steve, that you can do without Mark or with Mark only available via chat?
Well, I can blunder along. I could, yeah.
If you really wanted to troubleshoot, you could ask Mark to share his screen. Assuming that he's looking at something that has to do with Zoom.
Oh, that's a good idea. Maybe, although he can't unmute, he could share the screen.
Now, can you hear me now?
Oh, there you
Yes.
are. There's Mark.
All right, let's see if I
Yay.
can get the video going. Can you see me?
Yes.
Yep.
Okay, we're in. Thank
We're
you.
in. Okay, good.
All right.
So we were just about to start talking about the interface of BirdView. So here we are. BirdView is just a web page, and it's got all the data from our area loaded into it. I'm going to change this to blank search here. So when it starts up, BirdView shows all of the checklists ever for eBird and the breeding bird study in Santa Barbara County. And so this picture we're seeing on the map in the middle shows all the checklists that are currently selected. I call it the jellyfish. Okay, you have to say it with the right tone of voice. The jellyfish. So because it looks like a jellyfish. So it's got these long legs. It's a big multicolored jellyfish shape. This is showing every checklist in Santa Barbara County so you can see the shape of our county. We got this funny donut hole out here over Santa Barbara Island, and it extends way out into the ocean. These big, long yellow legs here are where ships went out and headed out in some direction and just did a checklist every so often. So there's all those checklists out there.
Steve, can you jump into us and show us a species in particular so that we can learn how to use BirdView? Let's take red-breasted nuthatch.
Okay, that sounds good. So the way that's done in BirdView is there's 3 sections. I'll give you a quick orientation and then do the red-breasted nuthatch. So on the left, down this left side, is the search fields. And here you type something that winnows or filters down the list of all the checklists down to the ones that have just the thing you're interested in. Then in the middle, we show the results. And up here above the map is the number of matches for your current selection. And then over on the right is the breakdown section where you do analysis of the selected checklists. So we'll talk about that more as we go through different questions. So let's go for red-breasted nuthatch. I'm typing the shorthand for it, but you can type the long form, whatever gets it in there. And then it immediately shows us here at the top left of the map that there are 3,647 checklists ever that had red-breasted nuthatch. I'm going to further restrict it to ones that have photos, because it's always good to have photos. That's only 183 of the checklists had that. Also, it's showing you the whole map of the county here, but as you select things, you notice that these dots, which are each a checklist, are concentrated on the land. So you can hit this button in the upper right, zoom to fit, and that'll zoom in so that you can see the checklists that you've selected, and it's more zoomed into the area.
Steve, why are the dots different colors?
One thing I should say is soon you're going to need to see in this upper right corner where the breakdown section is. And the way that Zoom comes up, it will cover that up. So I'd recommend grabbing that and dragging it to the bottom of the screen. For looking at BirdView, it's safest to have the picture of everybody down at the bottom. Then you'll be able to see the right side. So these dots are in different colors. Well, you might have just covered it up, dragging to the bottom, but right at the bottom of the screen, there is a color bar. It's a key that shows what each color means as far as the season. So green is spring and orange is autumn. So this one here is orange. That's going to be a fall sighting. Here's a green one. So that's a spring sighting. So you can get a glance, see where the birds are in the spring and fall.
Thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. Let's see. So in addition to that zoom to fit button, I can drag the map. You can do, Google Map type things where you can move it around. Let's zoom in here, for instance. And so here's Carpinteria. So we can see checklists, like here's one by John, our favorite guy. You'll discover that there's checklists all over the database from John and from Mark, because they are literally the two busiest birders in terms of producing data. So the database is full of their stuff. Let's look a little.
Steve,
Yes.
can I see, without the photos, can I see what the full extent of red-breasted nuthatch records are?
Oh, yes, let's do that. Oh, but let me quickly show you an actual photo. Let's do one here. So I've clicked now on this blue dot down in Scorpion Harbor, and it's showing me a list of all the checklists that were at that location that had matched our parameters for red-breasted nuthatch with a picture. And I'll choose one here, this one by John, our favorite guy. He got out to Scorpion Harbor. Well, he never stopped. And so if I click that, it'll take me to the eBird page. And in eBird, this is the checklist. Here's John Callender, Scorpion, and we can scroll down and look at the picture. Let's see what he's got. Oh, here's a good one. There, nice pick, John. That is a pretty bird. Okay, then I can close this tab. It opened a new tab to show us that. Close the tab and we're back into BirdView. Okay, now let's get rid of the photos, as Mark was asking. I'll uncheck this photo switch right here, the photo checkbox. Now we're seeing again the 3,000 different checklists. And let's see how they're laid out in the county.
Steve, can you break this down so that we see the year? Break it down by year.
Okay, yes. So remember, this is everything from all time in Santa Barbara County, every checklist. So yeah, it's good to see how many of them are really old.
This shows a very interesting pattern. When we look at the different years, we see something really intrinsic to red-breasted nuthatch. That is to say, it's an eruptive species. So the number of records we have tell us that we're in an eruptive year. Eruption is a phenomenon that happens mostly in fringillid finches or sparrows, but also in red-breasted nuthatch. And it occurs on the breeding ground when there's insufficient food to supply the population. At that time, eruptive species head way out of range, occupy areas that they don't normally occupy, and at elevations that they don't normally occupy, well out of the coniferous forests that they usually like to reside in. So here we see that in 2023, last year, we had this incredible eruption of red-breasted nuthatches. Other eruption years happened also in 2020, 2019. We had 2 years in a row, and in 2015. So every so often this happens. Steve, can we now look at a breakdown by month? Because that's another part of the story.
First, I want to say, Mark, that every time I talk to you, I learn some new word. I was just working on eruptive, just able to barely handle eruptive, and now you say fringillid. You're making this stuff up. You got to be making it up.
I am making it up. No, fringillid is a group of finches, old world finches in the fringillidae, and so this includes Cassin's finch. Some of the siskins are kind of like that as well. Those may be fringillid finches.
You literally could be saying anything, and I'd have to take your word for it.
Good, good.
Here, I want to mention what this chart is now. So we're looking at by month, and I did breakdown by month. So when I do a breakdown, it takes all these results, in this case, still the 3,600 checklists that we were looking at, and it sticks them into categories. So you can break it down by month, by year, by birder, by species, all sorts of things. So you'll see that's one of the great features of BirdView, that instead of doing a spreadsheet and sorting and moving stuff around, you can just go click, drag, and there you go. And as they say, Bob's your uncle. So
we can see that they're distributed both in the highlands and the uplands, but what if we were to change the sources of information? Let's take away the eBird checklists of the sources of information, Steve.
okay, I should mention what that is. So the sources up here at the upper left, that's one of the selections you have for choosing which records are being shown. And the two main databases, as I mentioned, are eBird checklists and BBS records. And the BBS records, Breeding Bird Study, that Mark and Adrian run, is all about breeding birds. So it's interesting because you can use it to compare and get answers for breeding questions. So since the eBird checklist is got much more data in it, eBird has many, many contributors. So it's swamping these numbers, and we're seeing these things on the right here that October is the biggest month. So I'll turn off eBird. And now we're just looking at BBS records, and we'll see that it switches entirely to kind of late spring seems to be the time.
So you'll see that most of these records are in the coniferous forest zone in the mountain district of Santa Barbara County.
Oh, and that's these green dots. He's looking and seeing where the green dots are.
But we also have some green dots along the coast. What's going on? After eruption years, some red-breasted nuthatches continue to stay in their low elevation, atypical breeding sites, and they breed, and sometimes they can stay for 2 full years. So you have this smattering of breeding records along the coast, both of the North Coast and the South Coast. And these are birds that are the results of a previous eruption year.
So it's interesting that we can see that by just clicking a few boxes. So we've just touched on a few things here, but I think that most of the rest of the talk, we're going to do kind of free-form bird questions and try to answer them with BirdView. So I'm going to ask Mark for the first one, but I'd like the rest of you to think of a good bird question you have, like something you want to know, and we'll try to do those and show how to do them. And I hope we'll elucidate a lot of features in BirdView when we do that. So Mark, can you start us off with a question?
Yeah, let's just look quickly at the difference between for red-breasted nuthatch, if we can go back to red-breasted nuthatch for a second, Steve.
Yes.
And look at the difference between breeding bird study records and eBird breeding records. They are two totally different things. Breeding bird study records are more precise. They are location specific. They deal with.
I'll just list them here. In fact, we can look at them by I don't think I described this feature very well.
Right.
If we put the cursor over one of these dots, this is a breeding bird study record, a box comes up. Anytime you put the cursor over a dot, a box comes up. And this is a short form of the checklist or record. So in this case, we see it's at the very top line, it says the location, which is in the mountain district. It's Big Pine Mountain, which is way out there, hard to get to. And the second line shows the date. This is the year 2004. You can see bolded there. So that's critical because often you're looking at older data in here and you might want newer. We can show you how to filter it to just newer in a minute. And also who did it? Dave Compton. So that's that one. Let's look at this coastal one. Chris Farmer. This is somebody you know, Mark, but I don't, I bet.
Yeah, this was a Sieber employee in the 1990s.
I see. And pair excavating hole. Okay, good to know.
So
at a golf course.
Yeah. So the difference is that you'll get a lot of breeding of eBird breeding records now, and that is one of the attributes of BirdView, is that for the first time it allows a mapping, an exposure, and breakdown of of eBird breeding records, which we've all entered for years, but have had no way to look into. BirdView
let's
solved
switch.
that problem.
I'll switch to that right now. So now
Please
we're
do.
looking at eBird.
Yeah. So,
Okay, so here,
for this
here's-
species, there's not a lot of records, but it is one of the essential differences that we can see now, finally, breeding bird notations that conscientious birders have made on their eBird checklist. And they're now able to see them. We're now able to see them on a map.
let me
Yeah.
explain what these are because people might not know. So in the eBird database, whenever you enter a checklist, you can also signal breeding information for certain of the birds in a checklist. So you might have a checklist with 10 birds, and you might indicate that 2 of them are breeding records, like because you saw a fledgling there or something. So what BirdView is doing for this is pulling those out as special breeding records and kind of listing them separately here for display. And that's because there's a bunch of extra information giving with the breeding records. Like this one that I'm hovering over here is a John Callender. John, again. So John was out there in the mountains, Ranger Peak, and he notice at the bottom of this box says carrying nesting materials. So when he entered that information, that indicated it was a breeding record, and it's separated out so you can do searches. You can search for, if you were interested, you could search for birds that were carrying nesting material and find those kind of occurrences. But I think that's good on that. Let's go for a different kind of question.
Steve, as an aside here, if you go over to your species, RBNU, why not replace the RB with WB? And let's just see what looks different. Instantly, when he chooses WBNU, white-breasted nuthatch, the map changes. And now we're looking at the eBird breeding records for white-breasted nuthatch. Steve, let's just click off eBird breeding records and look at breeding bird study records.
Done.
So it's
Very
largely
similar.
the same, but again, the kind and quality of data that you have in a breeding bird study record, it's much more precise, and it has auxiliary information such as the nest species that are chosen and the nest height. But it also includes more than just nesting. This is all sorts of breeding behavior. And so they're different records, but it's nice to now have eBird breeding records so that you can see a more complete picture of breeding in the county.
Okay, let's try a different kind of search.
Steve, I want to know where can I go to see Hammond's flycatcher in Santa Barbara County?
Okay, good.
Because that's an April species that's showing up now. People are expecting it to be present, but where can I see that?
Okay, let me explain how I'm doing it because I kind of jumped ahead. I'm going to, in fact, go back to the last search so I can show you what I just did. So I hit this back button, which is the same as the back browser button. You can go back to work back through your previous searches and get something you wanted. So here we were at the white-breasted nuthatch search, and I want to start a new one. I want to do Hammond's flycatcher, and I've checked this and that. I got BBS, I got breakdown by month. Maybe I don't want that for a new search. So the way you do it is you go to the new search button, and you can choose different kinds of new searches. So I wanted to do a straight, more eBird search, or you can do more of a breeding related search. And I'll just mention in addition, there is this examples button, which also has some pre-canned searches. They're just examples to show you how to do searches for different kinds of things. But for now, we're doing one from scratch. We're going to do an eBird search, and we'll do Hammond's flycatcher. And I will hit the zoom to fit so we can see where they are. Here's the Hammond's flycatchers.
Okay, that's very interesting, and I want to go see one in
You want to
April.
go see one?
I want to go see one, but Steve, it's an April phenomenon. So, and we're in April. So where can I go in April?
Okay, we'll restrict it to just the ones in April. And let's also restrict it to just the ones near here. To do that, we'll use districts, but I'm going to take a little aside here and explain what districts are for people who don't know. These are the Lehman districts. And so if you look at our county, here's our county, then there are, I'm going to open the district field. There are all these other little search things hidden in here. You can see little things kind of in slight gray. You can open those up by clicking them. And so I'm opening up district because I want to do a search by district. So let's look at South Coast. You see, that's the district of all of us here, all the way from Hollister Ranch out to Bates Road. Another district is North Coast. So you can see that is the whole area up to Santa Maria and above. Another is Cuyama. So Cuyama is the funny valley out there where all great treasures are found bird-wise. And then the other two are interior, which is inland, so horsey areas. That's how I think of it. And mountain. So mountain is just things, I think above 2,000 foot elevation, something like that.
Yeah, but it's the San Rafael Mountains, what's the northern one? I
Sierra
forgot.
Madre.
Yeah, Sierra Madre, thank you. Sierra Madre and the Sandy Inez Mountains. So there's three different
So I
zones.
see
and
the
yes,
3 ranges running through here. Yes.
they're generally
Okay.
above 2,000 feet elevation.
So now we have our districts. So let's go back to our search now for the Hammond's flycatcher. And April. And now we can put in that we want it to be in the district of South Coast.
Yeah,
which
because I
trims
have
it
a
down
doctor's appointment I
nicely.
need to go to, and I'm
This
not
is where you
gonna
need to
be
go
traipsing
to.
off to the mountains.
So now, even though we've done this, by the way, we're up here, we see there's 26 checklists. So there's not that many seen in April on the South Coast, but even that is too many because there's a lot of places to drive to. Which one should we go to? So the way to tell the best place to go is you do breakdown by location. So it's going to take those 26 and it orders them by the chance of seeing a Hammond's flycatcher. So what it's doing is let's look at the first one here. It says 15 of 183. That means out of 183 visits people have done to Refugio Creek Canyon, which is that line, only 15 of them saw a Hammond's flycatcher. And these are 4 checklists that were in April, matching our other conditions. So still, that's the best one. So you got a 7.4% chance, according to that number, of spotting this bird in Refugio Creek Canyon. And that is a good place. A lot of people go there to find out to try to see that bird. However, if you can, one of the great things about BirdView is you can dig in. So I'm going to click on Refugio Creek Canyon and we'll dive in a little bit. So now it's showing just the 15 checklists that were in that location. And now let's do a breakdown of those 15 by birder. And this shows which birder produced each checklist. And it adds up to more than 15 because some birders birded together. And so the total comes out a little higher. And so the thing I see here is that if you're Nick Lethaby, you can do pretty well by going to Refugio Creek Canyon to see the Hammond's flycatcher. And now Nick found one recently. So I went there like the next day. I did not find one. So I'm in the 183. Nick's in the 15. Just saying.
Just saying.
All right.
You can also look at that breakdown by, what was the other breakdown criterion that showed more information?
We can do a breakdown by checklist. And this is a different way. Is this the one you meant, Mark?
Yeah, that's it.
So this is a good display for certain kinds of things where it always shows the birder and the location, and each one gives a link that we can go to the eBird. You go directly to the checklist itself. And if you move the cursor over these green dates, it shows you those boxes, the same as when you're over the map, and gives you the specific information for that checklist. So this is good if you want to just cruise through a bunch of checklists looking for something visually. You can go.
But
Well,
Steve, I want to know, I want to see only those checklists with photos.
Let's see if any of these have photos. You simply go over here and click photo. That'll restrict it to now there's only 3. And
Can I see Connor Scotland's checklist, or maybe Steve
I-
Colwell's checklist? Let's see the master's checklist, Steve Colwell's.
All right. Here's Steve's picture of the Hammond flycatcher.
Ah, very interesting. So that's a Hammond flycatcher. Well,
So you
this
can-
picture and the photos, both in eBird checklists and in the breeding bird study, can be very helpful to help you identify a species or learn something else about the nest structure or the height or the tree type that they use for nesting. But this photo is helpful because it shows the long primary extension, the length of the primaries beyond the the longest tertial. And that is primary extension, and that's a feature that's helped us identify Hammond's flycatcher. Nice photo, Steve.
Thank you. I just wish I could see it this year. Oh, well. Okay, I would like to see if anybody, we have many questions we could answer, but I wonder if anyone in the audience has a question, because we can try to get an answer.
Yeah, so I was gonna say, to try and put some parameters, like, we don't have that many people, like, why don't we start with people in Zoom? And then we can do people in the room, and we'll kind of break it down that way. So I would say just go ahead and chime in if you're on Zoom and you have a question you want them to answer with BirdView.
To give you guys a moment to think about the question you have, let me pose a couple here. What if I was a parent of a child, and I want my child to know the species that breed within, a half mile of my home? And let's say my home is near Dos Pueblos High School. Steve, how would you find the species that breed within a half mile of Dos Pueblos High School?
Okay, that'll bring up a good new feature to talk about. So I'm going back to basics there. Hold on a second. You're interested in breeding, so I'm going to switch it to breeding only. Okay, now we're going to zoom into Dos Pueblos High School, which is here, off of Glen Annie. Okay, so there are breeding records all around. You see the dots, dot, 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 dot. And we're interested in the ones close, so we could just look at them here. That would be one way. But I'll use the opportunity to show a feature. Because if we did a list now of all the checklists, notice how many there are, 22,000 over the whole county. So a list showing those in the right wouldn't do us much good. We want a list of just the ones near here. So the way we do it is there's this little rectangle tool up here to the right of the map. We click that. Now we're in rectangle mode, and we just drag out a box at whatever range we want from Dos Pueblos High School, say this big. Okay, now it's only showing the checklists within that box, and there's 110. So that might be more approachable. Let's see what species those are. We do breakdown by species, and that shows us the frequency of each of the species seen in that box. These are breeding records.
As a parent, I happen to know where the red-tailed hawk nest is, maybe, but I don't really know where yellow warblers can be found breeding. Can you show me that?
Okay. The way we do that, there's a couple ways, but one is we could go type yellow warbler over on the left and restrict our search. But another way that's quicker here is you can just put the cursor over yellow warbler, and when you move the cursor over one of these, it makes the dots bigger in that area, so you can at a glance see they're all right around that intersection of Cathedral Oaks Road and Glen Annie. I see the big dots.
This is
So
a creek that has no name, but it flows along Glen Annie and along past that intersection and through the eastern part of the Glen Annie Golf Course. But it has no name. It's simply called the Glen Annie Canyon or something like that. I forget what it is.
so in Zoom, anybody else have another question? I have one if nobody else has one, but let's give people a chance.
I've got one, Steve.
Okay, Glenn, go for it.
This one's probably pretty easy. Show us what are the rarest birds ever reported in Santa Barbara County.
All right, let's see what we can do. So we'll go for a blank new search. We will go to the rarity level here. That's one of these hidden fields, and we'll choose very rare birds. So now it's just rare birds. Then we will choose breakdown by species. And these triple lightning bolt species listed here are the rare ones. So, but you know, Gargany isn't rare enough. You want the rarest. Okay, we'll keep going. So we're scrolling down here. Greater peewee seen in 41 checklists. Way too common. Okay, let's go. Here we go. Harlequin duck, 6 times. No. So looks like yellow rail, white-chinned petrel. These are the rare ones. These are very rare. Only in one checklist each.
However, some of those species, like the greater peewee, there's maybe actually that actually only represents 2 individuals, right?
Yeah.
Well, let's check that out. So the way we can tell that is I'm going to put in greater peewee just to trim this down. And it says 41 checklists have it. But as you say, the trouble with these rare birds is a flash crowd shows up and everybody gets a checklist off the same bird. So there's a thing you can choose here. I'm not going to explain it in detail, but it's minus duplicate sightings. So you can reduce that to checklist minus duplicate sightings. That'll get it down some. Now let's look at the locations. Yeah, it's been seen in several different locations. So it's hard to say, oh, let's look at it by date. So we will list the actual date of each of these sightings. Here they are. And so they're on pretty different times up until this run of them in December last year. So I'd say there might be 5 different ones.
Okay.
So that's
Now,
how
what happens when you click on any one of those dates, Glenn, Steve?
you can restrict it to just one of them, and then it just changes the display to just show that one. So here's,
I see.
now there are 2 on that date, but they were nearby. So this duplicate sightings thing is counting this as 1
Very cool.
because it's probably the same bird since they were on the same day. Does that work for you, Glenn?
Yeah, that's awesome. Thanks.
Are there other questions?
Yeah, so Nancy Barron asked in chat, get that in front of us. How do arrival dates of cliff swallows in our area this year compare to last year? And do we have any sense of relative numbers?
That's a good question.
That's a good one.
Cliff swallows.
I think I did that. Let me go back full screen.
Okay, so I'm going to do cliff swallow, and we're going to compare this year. Well, first we can just look. I'm going
They
to just.
arrive in March.
I'm going to change this to. Well, let's first use the date field, and just restrict it to this year and last year. Okay, 2023 through 2024. There's still many, many sightings. We have 2,000 sightings. And now let's see which months they occur. So you can do a breakdown by year and month. So here we can see that last year there were 485 in May. So we have to look earlier because it's still April. We're only halfway through April. So I don't know, it looks kind of comparable. So March had 88 of them last year, and March has 65 this year. And looking at April, it could be that we're about halfway, and that's about half the number. It looks comparable.
I think this brings up another question that's worth mentioning at this point, that both the breeding bird study and eBird, the numbers that we see are dependent upon the visitations that people have made. It's really a function of observer effort in both cases. So when we see differences, like comparing March 2023 of cliff swallows to March 2024, we have to remember that really this is in proportion to the effort that people have made. And those differences may not be biologically based, They may be just simply based on the effort. And that's important because this illustrates the difference between science and citizen science. And both eBird and the breeding bird study are citizen science. If they were science, we would have paid people going out and looking at a very regular frequency with a very consistent effort at what was going on. But that's not what we're doing with either eBird or the breeding bird study.
I wonder where you could see these birds. Let's say the locations. I'm going to switch it to hotspots only by clicking this hotspots only button over here. So the best chance of seeing them is Barren Ranch Trail, percentage-wise. But there's a lot of good spots. It's one of the many birds you can see at Barca Slough. I got to get up there.
Yep.
All right. That's good. Any follow-on questions for this one or a new question?
Thanks. That's interesting.
Steve, let me ask you to tell us, where are the most productive places for breeding in the county? How do we look at and understand which areas are really, really prolific in terms of breeding birds?
I have a follow-up
Let-
on this one.
Oh, can I interrupt? So in the
Yes.
room, we had a follow-up on the cliff swallow question.
Okay.
So on the Christmas bird count a couple years ago at Jameson Lake, we saw a cliff swallow. And we got lit up immediately for reporting it. Never happened. Paul Lehman says it never happened in December. So if you click just one thing to like go all years, Steve, would you see anything in December?
So yeah, that's a good, I mean, you're saying, do you want to see your record or do you want to see any record?
Because it got.
Yeah, okay.
And that's for
I
any
remember
record.
that whole discussion since I was, compiling the Christmas count. It was extensive and interesting. So we're looking for any cliff swallow records in December.
Okay, we'll switch this to December of any year. Oh, there really are none? Let's make sure.
Which was something that Paul Lehman pointed out in his first response when I was
Okay, let's
soliciting.
switch it a different way. Let's take away the date. So now it's all cliff swallows ever, and we'll do it by month. And we'll see, yeah, there's this pretty clear
Oops.
peak at May, and it trails off to Zippo in January and December. Nothing.
I feel even more special.
But where's that checklist?
I mean, part of the issue in that particular case, and I don't want to derail because this is fascinating discussion, but it was that at that time of year, you're actually more likely to have a cave swallow than a cliff swallow showing up in the county. And they're actually very hard to distinguish between each other. So if you want to report a cliff swallow in December, you got to get a really good look and ideally photos.
I mean, what an incredible tool this is, because we could have looked at this and said, what did we see? Could we have seen that?
Well, I didn't cave swallow see it in December.
It looks
We're now
like
asking, is there any cave swallow records?
nobody's ever reported a cave swallow. I got that search in. Yeah, never. Not
any.
even, they don't even have any alternate slashes for cliff / cave. So people weren't even putting in if they could do that at least.
Yeah.
So that's what you could enter is cliff / cave, right? We need to get an entry in there. Oh, you know what? This is hotspots only still. I'm going to turn that off. Maybe we'll see some.
Oh,
Okay.
one check.
Here's one. Let's check this out.
Like it's in car.
Here it is. At Birch
silly.
Street,
Yeah.
and this is in April. So that's not telling us too much because there's a lot of cliff swallows there at that time. But it must have been that looked like maybe a cave swallow. But it's not helping
I
us
think
on
it's
the
a
December.
statement that she just didn't really know which it was and couldn't nail it down to Cliff.
But you use the slash, which, is accurate. I mean, highly likely it was in fact a cliff swallow, but, the slash is still accurate.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Okay,
Well,
well,
let me do cliff swallow again now that I have hotspots only off. maybe we'll get a different answer. Okay. No, still nothing in December or January.
There was a question, someone had a question in chat that I lost track of, but Eve had a question, right? What rare birds have been seen in the Carpinteria area recently?
Okay, let's do that. So let's say recently means since maybe March 15th. Okay, and we're looking for rare birds. So I'll do a rarity level of just moderately rare instead of super duper rare. And we want to see what species. So here's what's been seen recently. Wow, that's quite a few. I mean, it's counting things like Sora, so it's not super rare. So look for the ones with more lightning bolts to get American tree sparrow. Oh, sorry, carp area. I didn't restrict it. Okay, let me restrict it to carp. I'm zooming into carp. And so I'm going to draw a box around it to say we're only interested in here. Okay, now we've only got orchard oriole, green-tailed towhee, purple martin, and solitary sandpiper. I don't think I knew about the solitary
I
sandpiper.
didn't either.
So here it is,
Uh-huh.
March 15. Yeah, it's in there.
Yeah, I remember this. Yeah.
That specific bird, we had follow-up about it, and you know, the opinion that I ended up foisting on the observer was that it was likely a spotted sandpiper given the location. But it looks like shared checklist, and she fixed her checklist, but they did not fix their checklist. So that's sort of lingered because of that.
I see, because it was multi people in the checklist. Yep. I see. So that's the rare ones semi-recently.
If I can just jump in, I know a lot of people probably have questions, but one thing I'm curious about is like, it's not really even a question, but I'm so impressed with how fast the results are. You know, a lot of these questions you can answer with BirdView are things you can answer using eBird, but it's much slower in the eBird interface. And then there's a whole bunch of other questions you can answer that you can't directly answer with eBird. And that, I guess, you know, it's sort of a geeky aspect of it, but it's because you're loading all the data into memory. Is that right?
Yeah, it turns out you can load all of the eBird data, all of the BBS data for the county forever into memory on your computer, in your web browser. It's like amazing. And I'm impressed with, we really do all have supercomputers on our desk, but normally we don't get to put them to good use. So it's nice to have something that gets to exercise a little. Your computer will thank you for the exercise.
And how do we access? How do we access?
So the question is, how do you access BirdView? And I'll say I do have a link to it. I mean, it's at a pretty obscure URL, right? You've got it hosted
Yes.
at an S3, an AWS address.
That's right.
I assume it's consistent. Like I've posted a link to it on the web page for this meeting at carpbirdwatchers.org. So that's one way to find it.
I think that's the best way, because right now it's not a short enough name that I could just say it. So we have to hand it to you. But it is freely available, and the URL doesn't change. There's two forms of the URL right now. One that has the word alpha in the name. So BirdView SBC alpha. So you should not use that one because it's got alpha test features in it, and so it might break from time to time. So the other one's the best one to use.
Steve, can I mention something now?
Yes.
The incredible attribute of BirdView is that you can learn from this by sending the URL of the search that you have formed. So example that's up there now is rare birds from 15 March of this year to the present, looking at eBird checklists. You can copy that URL and email that or text that to somebody else, and it will open up to that setting. And so this becomes a way of not having to fumble through instructions, but simply getting the results that you are looking for in a URL. And if you have a URL that has a number of variables open, you can simply modify any one of those variables and formulate the search that you want. So it's incredible that you can learn from about BirdView simply from the previous search that you executed, sending a URL of that search to someone.
Yes, I didn't do this properly. I'm using my local copy, but let me see if I can quickly switch this to the live version.
So a person could ask Steve, you know, where do I find yellow-breasted chat within a mile of my home? Steve could form that search for you and send you the URL, and that's the answer to your search, to your
So I'll
question.
do it right here. I'm going to post this one to chat. Now, it probably would be good if not everybody. No, I think actually this can handle it. So everybody can download this. But there I chatted you the URL for this particular search we're doing right now. And it'll take a while to load it. I mean, it's loading a few megabytes of stuff, but then you all should see this same screen I'm seeing approximately. So yes, you're right, Mark. This is the best way to do a search. You answer somebody's question, and you can send them the search, and then they can change stuff like the dates involved or the bird or whatever, and then do their own search.
Yeah.
Oh, I think I did that. I put my screen to sleep. So I'm having some technical issues at my end where my Mac is getting low on battery.
Uh-oh.
Yeah, I may have to change computers.
I think I missed a question in there that somebody asked. Does
Well, I
anybody
asked the thing about the most productive birding area for breeding birds.
Oh, yes. Let's see if there's any other audience questions, because I feel like maybe we need longer pauses for people to jump in. Anybody have a question about birds? Why are they so wonderful?
Steve asked another question, Steve. Does BirdView include rare birds that haven't been confirmed?
BirdView shows unverified rare sightings.
Okay.
Yeah, so Steve,
Yes.
there's a question in the room. Does BirdView include rare birds that have not been verified in eBird?
Let's see. Yes,
I don't think so.
the situation is that BirdView uses the eBird public data. And the way the public data works is when a rare bird is unverified, but it hasn't been treated yet by the reviewers, they haven't decided, then it will show up in the BirdView database. But as soon as the reviewers decide, no, this is unconfirmed, they decide, no, they don't really buy into that bird, then it disappears from the public database. And then from then on, we won't see it in BirdView. So really so I'd say the view of what BirdView is seeing is it's seeing the non-hidden checklists, so the public checklists that are either confirmed by the reviewers or they haven't actively unconfirmed yet.
Steve, can I ask a question?
Yeah. Hi, Adrian.
Hi. This is a question. I don't know whether Mark has disappeared for a while, maybe back. I just thought that I don't know where you intended to do this, but it'd be interesting to show how for the BBS records that all the data that's in BBS, like including, the evidence for breeding, the substrate, all this type of thing, how this data can all be presented using BirdView, all sorts of. Mark, were you going to do that or not?
No, I'm glad you asked that question, Adrian. It's a great question. So can you take it, Steve?
Yes, we have so many questions, Adrian. That's why we want you to bring up the ones that are interesting to you, because there's so many we could be talking about. So here I've changed the search to BBS records and all of them, and we're breaking them down by the breeding evidence. This is one of the important pieces of information with every breeding record. So how many of them involve nests, egg in nests, adulted nests. So there's all different sorts of categories. And you can see that the most common one is fledgling under parental care. For some reason, that's the most common entry in BBS. Interesting. And
It's also the easiest to detect.
let's look at one of them. Okay, this over here, this breeding search field has opened up because I chose a new breeding search. So it's giving me the opportunity. So you can search by the evidence, which is this thing we're seeing on the right. So I'm going to type nest in there, for instance. And so now it restricts it to only the ones that have the word nest in them. So if you're interested in nest or fledgling or something like that, that's how you would do it. Or the one below that is nest substrate. So this is what type of tree or structure. So I could put in euc here, and now it's showing me only the ones that were known to be in a eucalyptus tree. So that's the nest substrate. What kind of other things can we do? Can we do like building? Yes, we can do building. So these are the ones that are involved in the nest on a building. Okay, and then height, I've never done a query with this. Like on a nest that's more than 10 meters high, or above the ground. So there's still plenty. Okay, how about 100 meters? Sure, okay, so there's 3 that were 100 meters up.
That'd be interesting if you do it by species, Steve.
Yeah.
Okay,
So look at, what species, how greater than 100? Wow.
okay, 2 ravens. Let's go for greater than 50. See, get a few more. Okay, so red-tailed hawk, cliff swallow. Yeah, these are high-flying birds. How about the great blue heron? He's an overachiever, way up there. So yes,
this is greater than 50 feet,
it's meters.
Meters.
50
And
meters.
that brings up a point that I should have mentioned is on all of these fields, you can hover over the word and it tells you some details about it. So I hovered over nest height there, and it tells me that it's in meters and some other details about it. And that's very helpful when you're trying to figure out if you're trying to do a very careful search, you really need to know the details like this because you need to know meters and not feet, obviously.
We have a question in the room. Yes.
For such a common bird, I've never seen a turkey vulture nest. Can you pull that up?
Do we have any nesting records for turkey vultures?
Yes, we have quite a few. So let's just look at one. Here's one. Egg and nest in McCoy Canyon. I'm gonna change it to I'm not sure which way to break it down. Depends what we want to know. I guess I'm interested in the year. Yeah, they're spread out evenly over the last few years.
So what is the one this year?
The one this year is
Mark. Okay.
Mark saw a turkey vulture copulating. That's an ugly sight. No, sorry.
Copulating on it. Okay. Whoa, gee.
Steve, move the map over to Vandenberg and click on the spot on Vandenberg, northern Vandenberg, and then let's take a look at the photo.
Helicopter.
Uh-oh. It's not letting me in.
That happens sometimes.
Okay, so that one I can't look at the photo, Mark.
Oh, too bad. Okay.
Yeah, I'd like to see it. Is that going to be
It's from a helicopter.
from a helicopter? Pretty
Yeah.
cool.
It's dramatic photo.
This is something to do with when we started the BBS, we had Google, and we use Google to I forget what it was called, Google Table or something, and they've kicked us off that. But sometimes the older photographs still have to go through the Google process to get to see them.
In other words,
Turkey vulture is an
technical-
interesting species. It's one of the most secretive species that I can imagine that we have. And so their nests are very difficult to find because they're very clever at, regardless of how stupid they look, they're extraordinarily clever in concealing their nests. So that when they nest on slopes, they just simply push off of the slope and look as though they've been hovering and flying for hours, but you don't see the nest. And so we're on the lookout for turkey vulture breeding, and it's one of the very rarest of the breeding records that we've been able to detect.
Cool.
So I have another question. Is it possible if you were to look at, say, a kind of a frequency, an annual frequency of breeding by species? You can do that, isn't that right?
Well, so
So,
we could do it one species at a time.
yeah, well, that's what I'm thinking of. Like, take songspar if you want, like I think. I'm just, well, no, let's take one I'm more interested in. Let's take common yellow throats.
Okay, so here's an annual frequency.
So, what's interesting about common yellow throat is that we have very few breeding records for it, considering it's one of the most commonly seen birds in the county. Now, what I would like to be interested to see, is there any way that we could compare the eBird checklists with the breeding so as to illustrate that point, the point that it's a very commonly seen bird, but very rarely do people find evidence of breeding. This is because the bird's so secretive.
So we would be getting a proportion of breeding records.
If there was any way that you could bring up.
Yeah, can you compare breeding BBS with eBird?
So you could bring up simultaneously the eBird and the breeding bird data, but they have them separate.
Well, the eBird data is going to be so much bigger, right?
Yeah.
Let's see. Oh, wait a second here.
Can you create a columns thing, Steve?
I'm going to start over to make sure this is clear. Okay, so this is, yeah, so I could do it, but it'd be messy.
All
And
right. No,
there's 100 times as many eBird records. So but I see you want to kind of get the graph, right?
Can't you create a column A, column B for eBird versus eBird?
I could, but it's tricky in this case. So what I'm going to do is let's just eyeball it. So on the right is the breakdown by year. Is that what we're looking at? Yes. So now let's do it just for the BBS. So it's pretty different.
Yeah.
We can compare them here.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's interesting. There were a lot more breeding records in the 2008 era.
But I mean, what's interesting about it is one of the most common breeders in the county. And yet,
by the way, this is a good technique. I mean, I use it pretty often where you get two searches and you just kind of visually compare them over time by changing them like this. It's nice because it's fast enough to do this. So I use it pretty often for different kinds of searches that you would think, oh, I could get like some complicated display and put them both up, but you don't have to do that.
Does it change, Steve, if you use the eBird breeding records rather than all the eBird checklists?
Let's see. Yeah, the eBird breeding records, good point. Okay, now we're doing just the eBird breeding records. Yeah, that's a good one, John. So that's pretty comparable. eBird breeding records versus all eBird records are the same kind of shape.
Yeah, but the numbers are very different.
Yeah, in the room,
but it's 1/100.
In the room, Laura was wondering about, comparing eBird breeding records to BBS records.
Okay.
Excluding the all eBird records choice.
So this is the BBS, so it's clearly a very different shape. I'm not sure why. Maybe no, because 2004 is pretty big too. So this is hard to tell what's causing this.
It really is a function of what people have been searching for and how much effort they put into it. So biological information and insights are difficult to come by with citizen science.
I think
Yeah,
it's probably best to use the combined breeding records, BBS and eBird, because maybe people only enter one in one or the other. So you really need the combo to get the full measure.
So if I can jump in, we've kind of been going for a long time. We still have a few questions in the room that people are interested in asking. I don't want to cut this short, but I feel like, we could drill down so far on any of these questions. It's such a wonderful tool for doing that. Would you be okay if we kind of tabled this for now and just went on to other questions?
Oh, definitely. Let's do some different kinds of questions. So let's go for it.
Sylvia has a question in the room.
Say that in February of 2023, I was able to photograph turkey vultures populating on a telephone pole.
Awesome.
And I have pictures of them, but
Is it in an eBird checklist?
no, it's not because I'm so bad.
Well, if you can get the date and the location, you could put it in after the fact. So Sylvia has mentioned she has photos that she took on her phone of turkey vultures copulating on a telephone pole. But it's not in eBird. So we'll try and get that into eBird.
How do we get it in BBS?
So Mark, do you want to there's a question in the room. How do you get data into the BBS records?
Yeah.
Do you want a commercial for that?
I can show you the websites, but the web links, but the easiest way to do it, if you forget the web links, to either how to view the breeding bird study results or how to input a record into breeding bird study, you can go to the Santa Barbara Audubon website and ferret through that, and you'll find the page that deals with the breeding bird study. But I will post in chat. Do I have access to chat here? I think I do. And I'll post the input site and the viewing site for the breeding bird study.
Okay, thanks. Do we have other questions? I'll come back to, yeah.
Is this only Santa Barbara County at this point, and your plan to expand it at all?
Yeah, so the question, Steve, is BirdView only for Santa Barbara County, or can you use it in other locations? And if not, do you have plans to expand it?
It is only for Santa Barbara County right now. Actually, last year, as I was developing it, I was making it for all different areas. I did Hawaii and Arizona and so forth. And it's a little bit of effort for me to make it for each location, so I've let those fall aside. I was kind of doing it to help Linus. He was cruising around the country and he'd say, I'm going to Hawaii. I want to do BirdView, so I'd make a version for that. And then I'm going to the East Coast, so it is possible, but right now Santa Barbara only. It's not super hard to make one. So if you had a need for it in a certain area, you could let me know and I could whip you up one just for that area.
So he'll give you
I think that brings up what needs to be mentioned here is that Steve has dedicated himself to Santa Barbara County, both in terms of his software BirdView and BirdTalk. And his interest in our welfare and our birding delights has been so intense that he's dedicated all this effort to just Santa Barbara County. Well, there's no other part of the country that has these attributes that BirdView can bring to our awareness. So I think we should recognize Steve's exemplary effort and thank him for all his work. It has been a lot of work.
Thanks. Yeah, I like to play with birds in Santa Barbara. What can I say?
Yeah.
We're all the beneficiaries. I have one more. Could I ask a quick question? And
yes,
another aspect of it that I haven't seen you demonstrate yet, which is the birder feel. So I'm sort of a fan of the top 100 list in eBird, the county year rankings. I'm more of a spectator than a participant this year, but I'm curious. I know Sue is in the meeting and she's just like blowing away the competition. If I wanted to see where has Sue Cook birded in Santa Barbara County this year, can I do that with BirdView?
Yes, you can. So let's do that. I'll start a new search. It's pretty easy too. By the way, I should mention that this is possible because Sue's data is publicly available, and BirdView follows the rules of the eBird data. And so there's various settings you can make in eBird for privacy if you don't want people to be able to see where you've been and so forth. So so if you had those set, people would not be able to see, for instance, where you've been in the last 2 weeks, which is one of the settings in eBird. But Sue doesn't have that. She's fine with us looking. So let's type Sue Cook and let's do 2024. So here is where Sue has been this year. And let's look at the nice thing about Sue is she's got this big old camera. Let's see. I think sometimes she makes a checklist and has just tons of pictures. Where I'm looking through her checklist here. Well, here's one with a, no, let's do one of these. Okay, here we go. This is a grebe related. Whoops, sorry, I lost it. Here, I'm just going to pick one. Here we go. Loon Point. I'm having a little trouble selecting. Oh, it's because of. No, I'm not able to get to it.
Steve, can you not just list all the lists using the right-hand column? No, also.
Yes,
sorry.
that's what I did. I can do that. So here's some loon pictures. Sue got a horned grebe. Oh, let's look at horned grebe. I always like horned grebes. Yeah, there we go. Nice.
Do we crash your browser, Steve?
I think I went to close another window and I closed my browser. Sorry about that.
Okay, well, we're actually to the point where we could wrap the meeting up pretty soon. I don't want to cut off people's questions. So if people still have questions they want to ask, like maybe last call for questions. Yeah.
Mark, you made a point about citizen scientists and scientists. And it got me thinking about how people like novices like myself who have been around birding for 4 or 5 years, and I'm feeding information now into this thing. Have you seen in your length of time, have you seen information increase just in birding generally, and how that might skew any of the information? Like made a point on, well, maybe 20 people saw that bird. Like, how does that number of people putting information in and the number of people who visit a bird? I don't know how to even say all that.
Yeah, there's a lot of interesting questions that kind of tie into that. So Mark, it's directed at you, and he's saying, in your experience with citizen science versus science, what sort of, I guess I'll summarize or kind of shape it. What sort of changes have you seen with the growth in citizen science? Are there sort of interesting aspects of it, or are there certain pitfalls in that kind of data, or just, what sort of observations can you make about it?
Well, it's all relative. The findings are all relative to where people have looked and the number of people who have looked, of course. And sometimes the people that look have special focuses. They're interested, as I am, in red-tailed hawk nests. This idea that red-tailed hawks are extremely partial to eucalyptus on the south coast, but their breeding density drops off once you get away from the eucalyptus zone. So that's an example of a kind of skewed and biased search effort that goes into citizen science that would not be a part of science. So one compensation that you can make is looking at your results as a proportion of overall breeding bird records. And that is still not perfect, but it compensates and adjusts a little bit for the amount of observer effort that's gone into generating the data that you're interested in. So it is a flaw, it is a problem, it's an attribute of, even though citizen science has these huge benefits, it falls a little bit short in some ways to make, and so you have to be very careful in evaluating some of the results that you might be tempted to draw.
Yeah, thanks. That's an interesting insight for sure. Okay, so last chance for questions, either from in the room. I see we've got some comments in chat that I've been ignoring.
I'll add one more thing, which is that I love working on BirdView and improving it. And also, it's very helpful to me when someone writes to me and says, how do I do this search? Because then often it's something that I haven't made as simple as it could be, or it's not able to do it. And then I add that feature. So what I'm saying is, if you would like to use BirdView and you're trying to do something and you're puzzled how to do a search, feel free to write to me about it and I'll be happy to give you an answer how to do that search.
Steve, can I ask you how often you update BirdView, both with respect to eBird records and breeding bird study records?
Yes, I update it about twice a week. Usually on Monday and Thursday, I try to update it so you can have all the weekend data and you can get ready for the weekend. And sometimes it's much more often, like every day. You can tell at the top of in the blue bar at the top, it has the date that the data is up to at the moment. So right now, for instance, it's up to date to today as of about 1 p.m.
Awesome. Well, looking through the chat, it was just, there were some kudos and thanks being expressed, and I'll certainly join in that. And thank you very much for all the time and effort you put into this. And thank you for presenting it tonight. You know, I've been kind of, remiss in that I've known BirdView existed and I've seen some examples of what it can do, but I hadn't really spent the time to really explore how to interact with it. And I will be doing much more of that in the future based on this demonstration, because it really is very impressive and just very fun. I can, all kinds of questions I can try and answer in there, which a lot of us do already, via eBird. But again, this is just so much more fun because you get the answer so much more quickly and there's so many more ways you can drill down into it.
It's a blast.
Yeah. Very, very cool tool. We're very lucky.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, yeah, well, thank you. Another round of applause for Steve. I'm going to go ahead then and end the meeting, but thank you everybody for participating. This is a good, lesson for me. I was, kind of chatting before the meeting, like, oh, I don't think there'll be that much participation. It's pretty much a niche subject. I was like, no, this is one of the most well-attended meetings we've had in a long time. There's a lot of interest and I'm really happy to see it. So thanks again, everybody. And we'll see you on Saturday at the Carp Salt Marsh, or we'll see you out there in the field and we'll see your data in BirdView and it'll be great.
That's great. I hope everybody uses it. Bye-bye.
Thanks, folks. Bye-bye.